This problem, we are, without a calculator, finding the sine and the cosine of 5 pi over 4. Let me write that a little better. So this is the sine of 5 pi over 4, and then down here, the cosine of 5 pi over 4. Okay, so how do we find the sine and the cosine of, those are radian angles? Well, the short answer is you go to the unit circle. You're going to have a copy of this in your notes. You can use it on the test, your homework, everything. So just find 5 pi over 4 on this unit circle. There it is right there. So this is the cosine, this is the sine. Turns out they're the same. But the x-coordinate is always the cosine, the y is the sine. So we'll take that back. They're both the same. They're both minus root 2 over 2. So on the exam, you won't have a calculator, but you will have the unit circle. So you could find the sine cosine of any value. So they could ask me 11 pi over 6. So the cosine 11 pi over 6 would be root 3 over 2. And the sine of that same angle, 11 pi over 6, would be minus a half. Does that make sense? All the way around the unit circle, the x is the cosine and the y is the sine. Cosine, sine, cosine, sine. So for whatever angle you're at, in degrees or radians, they have all these angles listed for you in degrees and angles. Cosine, sine, 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 cosine, sine. All the way around, the x-coordinate is the cosine and the y-coordinate is the sine. It is defined to be that way. They just made it up. Again, sine and cosine were made up to help us deal with things in the real world that are cyclical, like engines and human bodies with the blood flowing back and forth between the heart and the body and the rest of our body, and the moon and its cycles and all the planets, and the electric current coming out of the wall. All kinds of things in the real world are cyclical, so sine and cosine were made up with a little dot traveling around the outside of a unit circle, rising and falling, rising and falling, rising and falling. And the x-coordinate is the cosine, the y is the sine. It does a cycle, and we use it. We made it up so we could use it to represent things in the real world that are cyclical, periodic. So there we go. That's how you just use your unit circle. You can do that on a test, homework, everything, to find sines and cosines.